Beware Romulans bearing gifts.
Hi, this is Eric.
This is Carl.
And this is Caleb.
And at long last, welcome back to new Romulans Bearing Gifts. This is episode 78, Strange New World Season 2, and many other things. The latest season of Lower Decks. All that stuff is far in our rearview mirror at time of recording. And so we're back on track with just some random TV trek. And I think it was mentioned possibly during a previous episode a long time ago, or maybe we talked about it off mic after we recorded an episode a long time ago. But that is where this selection came from weeks and months ago. It might have been spring, possibly, when we were talking about this.
Actually, I don't know what episode it was on, but I do have the date written down. It was January 30th of this year.
January 30th is when we had this conversation. Great. Well, it's finally here. Voyager, Season 5, Episode 6, Timeless.
What if you had one chance to change history?
They were all killed on impact.
One chance to save your crew?
We're here to save 150 lives.
If you succeed, countless lives will be affected.
They will risk it all
It's not working.
We're coming in too fast.
to run a race
All hands brace for impact.
against time itself
I killed them!
on the next Star Trek Voyager.
All right. Since I believe Carl was the one who proposed this, and I know there was a reason, and I know it had something to do with whatever we were talking about at the time, but I don't remember what that is. I hope Carl remembers.
Caleb remembers.
I don't.
I'm sure between the two of you, someone... Oh, okay. Caleb doesn't remember. So, Carl, what do you recall of how this came up?
I don't remember. I just remember that this is a Voyager episode that I thought was really, really a strong one. So I can't remember what the details were, but we were trying to think about something about, good episodes of Voyager. And, we were talking about sometimes it was up and down, but I stood up and I said the Timeless is really one of the strong episodes from Voyager. So I don't remember what brought it up.
That could have been part of it, but I mean, yeah, that makes sense. But I feel like there was another part to it.
It probably is.
Like maybe we had just seen like tomorrow or something.
Maybe.
I think that would have been before, because I think Tomorrow came out in, I don't know, was it August or something?
Yeah, I couldn't remember if that was. Wait,
Or July, maybe?
it couldn't have been August. I don't remember.
Well, it wasn't January. It wasn't January, though.
I don't remember. Oh my gosh, hold on.
Sometime during the summer.
Now I have to know because I can't even remember when that season of Strange New Worlds like started and finished.
I think it started in June.
Mm-hmm. It was mid-year.
Okay, so Tomorrow aired on June 29th of this year.
That would be after January.
Correct. But okay, so I did believe that yes, part of the conversation was a good episode of Voyager. I thought, and the reason I thought tomorrow was because I thought something that may have had something to do with time travel or alternate universe or twist was also part of the discussion, but I don't know.
Well, I'm sure it was something timey-wimey. Invoke the conversation. Yes, I remember it was something time related.
And then, so obviously, Carl, whether you were thinking of a good or interesting episode of Timeless, obviously this one came up. And so, first of all, when was the last time you had seen this prior to preparing for this conversation?
Maybe 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. fairly recent.
Mhm.
And prior to you were watching it again now, I guess what were some of the things you remembered as to why you wanted to suggest it in the first place?
Well, I mean, again, Voyager has been kind of up and down, hit and miss, and when it's good, I really remember it. I really, those episodes tend to stand out. Um, and I like them. When I like them, they're always for different reasons. Sometimes I just like the Borg. Sometimes, of course, I like Seven. Chakotay has an interesting episode. So it's always something that stands out about it. And this one, so many things are right about it. But one of the really remarkable things, and maybe this is what we were talking about, it's very rare that Harry Kim gets a win.
Yeah, true.
It's very rare that he comes out strong in any of these episodes. And this is probably the only one that I can think of that really, Harry Kim really got a chance to be on top. Really just this is his episode. And it wasn't, a throwaway episode. It wasn't a small one. This is a pretty epic episode for him. So I have a feeling that we're also talking about, Harry Kim or underrepresented characters. And this one, hey, Harry shines. It's a really good one.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of any other as significant or more significant Harry Kim episodes.
Nope.
I do recall he has moments in episodes where he plays a key role, but not like Harry centric.
Yep.
But also let me say, of the 90s plus or pre-Paramount Plus Star Trek series, Voyager is by far the one I revisit the least and always has been. And honestly, I don't think I've watched any Voyager episodes voluntarily in probably since like 2010 or something. The only ones I have seen post 2010 are ones that we did for the podcast. Mm-hmm. So that's like the only time I've revisited Voyager. And so Caleb, I have no idea, but when you watch this now, did you recall it? Like, had you seen it before? Was it like you were seeing it for the first time?
Oh no, yeah, this was definitely one of the ones that stood out in my memory of Voyager. I don't know if I remember when you mentioned the title, but very early on I recalled which one this was. And I was excited for it because I do remember this one being a good one for Harry Kim, a character that I usually just think of as a bit of a fool. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe we'll see. And I do like that they kind of integrate that in there, that this is all just a screw up on his part that kind of set the whole plot in motion.
Interesting. So I now I feel like the odd duck in the room because so this episode came out in 98, I believe, original airing. And the thing about 1998 for me in general is from 98 to early 2001, that was just a time when I just had so much going on in my regular life. It's like the only time in my life where I really didn't see any Star Trek at all on television as it was going out. And honestly, I didn't hardly see any television, period, during that same time frame. So I had missed a bunch of DS9 and Voyager episodes when they were initially coming out. So it's like a weird dark period for me, like in my memory. Although I have since gone back and filled in all the blanks on DS9, the ones I missed. But to this day, I'm not 100% sure if I did fill in all the blanks on Voyager. I may have or may not. The jury's still out because I know I did rewatch a bunch of the Voyagers when they first came out to Netflix. So I don't know. And then this episode in particular, I'd say there's an 85-90% chance I haven't seen it before.
Wow.
Or that's what it felt like. But I'm not 100% sure, but I think. And the reason I think that is because now having seen it, I feel like I would have remembered it, just as you guys said. Now, and the reason I'm not 100% sure is because it did remind me of sort of like the setup, like with the cold open and everything else. It did kind of remind me of the setup of some 90s Trek in general, but that have similar type situations, but nothing specific. I mean, I could think of a TNG one in particular or two that it reminds me of, but I could just be associating it with something that doesn't exist. Or like I said, 10-15% chance maybe I did, and this is barely all I can remember. So in this episode, I'm assuming, just like us on the panel, if you're listening to this episode of the podcast, you either very much remember this episode, or you may have just missed it like me, either because you just weren't really into Voyager, or you've just never really watched Voyager, or you just didn't see this one. And so obviously, this is a spoiler cast. So the setup with the cold open is very classic Trek. And I mean classic Trek in the neo-modern sense, or it's almost like a Trek trope in a way to start off the episode with, okay, things aren't the way we're used to. And there's many Star Trek episodes that do that kind of setup. And it doesn't take long for us to realize that Harry, Kim, and Chakotay are a little bit older than we're used to seeing them. And we also I saw at least 2 or 3 regular crew members who are incapacitated when they get back to inside the Voyager.
The frozen one, yes. Uh-huh. Right. And so obviously there was a situation, and then that's the cold open, but we returned to Voyager in the past, which is really the present if you were keeping up with the show in real time. But for Harry and Chakotay, it is 15 years in their past. And we see that they had been working, and I can't remember, maybe they did. I don't know if either of you remember, like the what was it called, a slipstream drive? Was that something that had been mentioned in earlier episodes in season 5, like maybe in the background? Yeah.
Or did it just come out right now?
No, it was a Borg technology that
Right.
they were envious of, and they didn't know how to perfect it.
Yes. Okay. So I do remember that. I do remember that was an ongoing thing back when I was revisiting Voyager.
Anytime they interacted with the Borg always jetting around with his crazy,
Yes.
crazy conduits, and they're like, "Can we get a ride? Can I get home, please?" It just never quite worked out. So they're like, "Heck with this!" They got a Borg on board. They tried to study the transwarp technology, and so they were, this was their
Okay.
effort to create it. And technically, it's quantum slipstream is what it's called. But
Yeah. I remember they used the Q word.
yeah, that was the technology that was.
I wonder if Q's called Q because of quantum.
Really not. No.
So, again, I remember that storyline in the series, so I must have seen some of these episodes before. Anyway, so in the beginning, they're basically saying the technology is ready. We're going to do like our first real, I want to call it a test run, but it's sort of like the run because it needs to work the first time, and it hasn't actually been turned on fully until now. And before they embark on this, they sort of have like a little celebration in engineering. And according to the internet, while that celebration plays a role in universe, in story, supposedly there was also a coinciding out of universe reason for the celebration, because supposedly they were also co-celebrating that this was the 100th episode of Voyager at the time.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So yeah. And then also I think it was Berman who said that he wanted this episode to be Voyager's City on the Edge of Forever episode. Now, while I may like this episode,
Oh,
I'm not going to call it the City on the Edge of Forever, which I also coincidentally saw recently.
All right, well, I am not a huge fan of Rick Berman, so
no.
the fact that he was in any way involved in this one, and it turned out well, is that is a miracle in and of itself. No, okay. Listen, okay. I told you. I've told you this before, but I'm going to reiterate because there has been some question historically. I took such issue with the way Rick Berman was running things in Star Trek at the era, during the time this was on. I bought rickberman.com, the domain name, and I was just going to lay into him. I swear, I had the domain name, and it was just getting so ridiculous. I was like, I have had it. But Star Trek was canceled. The Enterprise and all that just got canceled. I was like, damn it. So I never got a chance to go after him. But it was ridiculous. I am not a fan of Rick Berman.
So, for anyone who follows our sister or mother podcasts like Mostly Harmless Cutaway and Doctor Who Business, basically what Carl's expressing is that at this time in Star Trek, he feels that Berman was pulling a Doctor Who Chibnall. Because, the way you were just talking about him at that time sounds like what a lot of Doctor Who fans were saying about Chibnall not too long ago.
No, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
And Eric was there loving it. He was loving Enterprise at that time.
Because I was sick of Voyager.
Not
and when they first said that, Voyager's going to end and then they're going to come back the next year with this new show. Like, I had that, to put it in Doctor Who terms again, even though it's not like a new showrunner, but I was like, oh, good, like Tennant's coming back, or like we're going to like move on to something else because I'm so done with Voyager. And also, by the way, I've said this, but probably ages ago on this podcast, when they first announced Voyager was going to be a thing, I was very excited. And when I first heard what the premise of Voyager was going to be, it sounded really good to me on paper. So I was as excited as anyone. And I was excited because I didn't have cable. I was excited we had this new network called UPN.
UPN, yep.
So like my number of stations went from like 4 or 5 to 6 or whatever. So I was very excited and had lots of hopes. But yeah, we all know how that turned out. But so yeah, that's why I was excited. And then of course, soul crushing when Enterprise started getting good and then it got canceled. But that, again, a story for another day.
Yeah, I'll say, strangely, I have very mixed feelings with Voyager because most of the time when I go back to it, I mean, it's pretty clear that this is the show that they were just putting less effort into. Like, so many the cast don't feel as polished. The writing definitely feels less polished.
Yes, agree.
And even the way that they shot it kind of feels like it was, okay, paint by numbers. Where's the crew that have been doing this for the past, 7 or 8 years? Just keep them going, whatever.
Yes, I agree.
But as a kid, this was the new Star Trek, the one that I was watching week to week. And especially for the opening theme, I have it just stirs very, very strong emotions for me watching the opening title sequence. And so every time I put on an episode of Voyager, it always just puts me in a happy kind of place. And then I watch the episodes and it's kind of like, oh, yeah, it's not quite there. But I still always have a kind of underdog spirit and look for the quality episodes. Like I think this one is. Yeah, definitely not City on the Edge of Forever. But for Voyager, yeah, this one definitely stands out still.
Yeah, I will say while Voyager was still running at that time, yeah, this probably was my all-time favorite Star Trek opening for television up to this point. Or it's the one that impressed me the most up to that point in Star Trek history. So, okay, I'll give it that.
All right, so again, they just finished the Quantum Slipstream. Party was going on, and now apparently it's because it was the 100th episode of Voyager. So, well done. Maybe they gave it a couple of extra bucks because something felt bigger about this episode than a lot of the other ones. So, okay, 100 episode. That's awesome. Quantum Slipstream. But Tom had some issues. Tom said there was something that was not quite right there in the middle of the party. He was doing diagnostics and things did not look like they were quite right.
So So obviously I haven't seen the episodes in a million years, the ones that came before and after this one. So just taking this a little bit in a vacuum, Timeless, it did seem a little bit weird to me that Tom, of all people from the main crew, was so kind of obsessed with this. Did that strike weird to anyone else? Because just my memories of Tom is, he's one of the younger guys who just kind of goes along with things and is often has his goofy moments or side trips in other episodes. So it seemed weird to me that he was being very on the ball. Like, I felt like this would have been something Tuvok would have been looking to, or B'Elanna would have been noticing. I don't know. Is it just me?
Yeah, he was getting more responsible at around this time. So he was not the, free-going Neo Kirk that he was at the beginning of the series.
Oh, that is what he was, a Neo Kirk. Yeah.
That's what he was supposed to have been. But you know how Voyager goes. It never quite worked out that way for him. And about this point, he was becoming a bit more responsible.
Okay.
There's other stuff, right? He'd gotten in trouble, and So he was tightening mess up at this point and trying to be a bit more responsible. And seeing this, he's the pilot, and this is a ship full of people that he cares about. While I agree with you, it probably would have been more natural for somebody like Tuvok or B'Elanna to have identified this. I'm assuming it's because B'Elanna was so close to the engine,
right?
And the design
that makes sense for her,
and that he was preparing to pilot it. So he might have had a different kind of perspective on things.
Okay, no, that helps. That's why I asked. So yeah, I forgot, I guess, his character arc. So okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but speaking of characters, maybe making some weird stuff for them, and I guess it actually isn't weird for Janeway because she does at times seem very reckless as the captain.
True.
Of Voyager. But yeah, I mean, she says that, oh yeah, the crew, they're all in support of this, but it does seem like a pretty damn risky move. Just this untested engine, and completely relying on Harry Kim too. It's like, oh no.
And the fact, and I like that they were doing the simulations, and maybe this was unspoken in the episode because I was like, it shouldn't just be the two of them. It should be like all the main crew going through these simulations and like seeing. But like I said, maybe that happened off screen ahead of time and they were satisfied. But then that doesn't make sense if that is what happened. Like, why would it have worked before and not work now in simulation? Mm-hmm. And the fact was like, are you going to tell the captain? What? How is that even a question? That would have been the very first thing I would have brought up immediately and then said, yeah, we're going to run some more simulations. What are you talking about? Not only because it's important information, but because your own life depends on it too, potentially, not to mention everyone else. I don't even know why I'm getting critical right now, because I wasn't that critical when I was just watching it by myself. It's just because we're talking about it, I'm getting extra worked up.
Yeah, that's the main flaw for the episode is, one, Janeway being reckless, which is more of a character flaw because we consistently see that with her. But completely relying on Harry Kim just seems stupid. And then you gotta wonder, is he not wanting to tell them and maybe just working with Tom because of his ego? That because it's all on him, he wants to keep as many people out of it as he can. They don't really go into that too much.
That's a dark timeline. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I could see how that's possible if you read between the lines, but that's a little dark.
Well, that's an interesting take because, like I said, Harry has been kind of invisible and in the background for most of the series. And here was one opportunity that, he was taking some initiative. He's like, I see a path to get us home. This can work. And he was feeling very confident about this. The one time that Harry steps up to the plate and tries to make the difficult decisions that everybody else does, he basically ends up killing the whole crew. And he spends 15 crazy years trying to, like Ahab, trying to recover from the possibly arrogant decision that he made. I'll take it that maybe that is an ego thing, is why they were, maybe keeping it to themselves or trying to make that decision and not really talking to the cat. There were many other things that, so I agree. Janeway is generally kind of reckless. This was year 5 into their journey, and she was coming to the, realization that a lot of her decisions ended up getting them not only stuck there, but she had missed many opportunities to get them home. I mean, there's that whole Gilligan's Island thing about Voyager, where there's always the option, and then at the last minute they snatch it away.
That's true. That's a funny comparison.
No, please. That was one of the things I really found kind of annoying about Voyager.
Incredibly annoying.
I would expect the the Gilligan's Island twist at the end. So, that part was becoming rather tiresome, which is why with this episode, even knowing it was coming, they took a big old arc with this one. I thought it was an interesting way, and Voyagers always tend to, be kind of like bottle shows. And so I thought this was a very interesting way, even in the bottle, to tell a bigger story.
Yeah, and I almost feel like there was other episodes of Voyager that were a little bit like this.
Oh yes,
where it seemed like they were going to get a big win, and then it flipped around.
Well, there were a bunch of them that seemed like they were going to get home. It's just this one, the attention to certain characters, the way that the story fit together, it just felt smoother in this one.
Oh yeah, it was fine. And earlier, I thought you were going to say Janeway was starting to realize they only had 2 more years left on their contract.
No, that's not what I was going to say. What I was simply saying is,
I understood.
She's getting annoyed too.
I get you. Something that I just started to think during this conversation, something I was thinking earlier on this episode, when you were just talking about what we were just talking about Janeway kind of being rash and just making strange decisions. Some of the bit we just talked about in the story, but also some of the stuff, the interactions with her and Seven later in the episode, kind of remind me of things I've said about Pike in Strange New Worlds Season 2. That for being the captain, it's weird how his crew will just suggest an idea or strategy, and he'll just be like, okay, let's go with it, without even really questioning it very much. Or even if the idea was like spur of the moment or counterintuitive, he would just be like, if that's what you really think, then that's what we're going to do. And it bothered me in Season 2 of Strange New Worlds, because I felt like he did it a lot. Would just sign off on things. And so I was just reminded of that with what we were talking about with Janeway. And then the other thing that I had felt earlier, oh my God, I don't know if I can still remember what it was. I don't know. I don't remember the other one. Maybe it'll come back to me later. I yield.
Yeah. I remember I wasn't on that episode, Lost in Translation, when Uhura wanted to blow up that super expensive installation.
Yes!
And he was just like, oh, okay, sure, I'll just line me up with a call once we're done, and I'll talk it over with the officials.
Yes, he's
really?
Yeah, he's just taking it from this recent cadet who turned to ensign, who is like communications and not even like tactical or anything like that. It's completely wild. And there's going to be inquiries later. So you guys destroyed this multi-trillion latinum station that we've been working on for a decade. Why exactly? Well, the ensign was like ...
She was hearing voices and seeing things and told me.
Like, what? And then the other one was, what was the episode called? Under the Shadow of Night, or
Under the Cloak of War.
Under the Cloak of War, when he's briefly speaking to Abenga and Nurse Chapel, and he's like, there'll be some type of investigation, but I can just take care of this. Like, what? Like, that's the counseling? I had some counseling sessions when I was during my time in the military, and they never went easy like that when I did something questionable.
You could even get the sense that he was like, okay, I can tell these two are being shady. I know they're lying to me, but I'm not going to push too much. I got other things to do.
Like, can you imagine if in our American government, like some ambassador just gets killed by some notable American politician or military person, and it's like, oh, so it's like that? Okay, we'll just take care of it. What? Okay, whatever. I get it. It's TV. I don't have to get too crazy.
Yeah, but I guess it's been a while since we've talked about some Voyager. I always did prefer this era of it. Having 7 of 9 there is always nice. I did like her little drunk scene. That was, I mean, it was a little bit silly, but it was kind of cute. Her enjoying the EMH as her mentor.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I'm never happy to see Neelix though. Neelix is not a fond memory of this program. That guy.
Yes,
just
I agree.
Silly little fool there.
I agree very much about the Neelix, and also I agree that while as much as I dislike Voyager, it was definitely better post 7 of 9, and not just because of 7 of 9, but just because definitely more interesting stories started to pop up after that sort of switch they did. Although I was sad to miss Kess because I did enjoy her during her seasons, even though she wasn't always utilized the best way either. I just liked her.
Yeah.
And so I was a little bit sad, but no, definitely the show improved once they made that transition.
Mm-hmm. Scorpions, yes.
Yeah, but I am curious about, because again, the whole plot is Harry and Chakotay coming from the future to change the past and erasing the present that they're in. And we have this Tessa something, I can't remember her last name. And she's been...
Tessa Osmond?
Osmond, yes. Mm.
Oh, it might be misspelled on IMDb because there's no S in there.
Oh, no S? Oh, Ormond? What is it?
Omnod.
Ormond. Oh, all right.
Yeah, and she's shacking up with Chakotay. And her motivations I find a little bit odd. But every now and again with Voyager, and this pops up a lot whenever I go back to them, there's just these like weird like little rough edges or speed bumps that I hit. Or I'll be just watching the episode, just enjoying it, like it's a normal Star Trek episode. And then either just an awkward delivery or a terrible line will pop up. It'll just like jerk me into the show for a moment. I'll be like, whoa, like what was that? How'd that make it past the script editors? And the one that happened in this episode is when the EMH is asking like, oh, who's that? And then Harry's like, that's Tessa. They're having sex. And then he's like, what? It's like, oh, her and Chakotay are joined at the hip. I was like, why did you just say they're having sex? It's so awkward.
So that line also jumped out at me a little, but not as much as it did to you, Caleb. Definitely noted it. But then quickly in my head, I just thought Harry understands the EMH and what it is. It's basically like talking to a computer with a bit of an AI personality. So I felt like he was just giving directly the computer or the hologram, just straightforward knowledge because there's no reason to sugarcoat it or couch it a certain way like you would with a human. That's just, and I just kind of moved on in my head after I thought that.
That's a fair way to rationalize it out. Yeah, smooth out. Yeah, that very rough edge. At least it felt rough to me.
Mm-hmm. And remember, that is kind of the way the Doctor carries on too in terms of describing things. He's very blunt anyhow, so that seems to be an accurate way to convey the information to the Doctor.
That's fair.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it could have been also, and I feel bad saying this for poor Garrett Wang. I always felt like he was the roughest of the actors in this, and maybe the most inexperienced. At least that's who he feels. I don't know his career.
Yeah, kind of out of the core or recurring cast. Yeah, I think he would fit that description for me.
Yeah, so it could have just been an awkward delivery from him. And I do appreciate seeing this more darker version of Harry. But sometimes I feel like, yeah, Garrett Wang is maybe pushing a little bit too hard with it, trying a little bit unnaturally to feel like the darker version of that character. I mean, he mostly pulls it off, but...
Yeah, his future self, while neither him or Chakotay hardly looked aged at all. I mean, they just had grayer hair. Because other than that, they looked remarkable for 15 years, being 15 years older. But the way he was acting, Garrett Wang, definitely seemed like an older Harry Kim. And so, that was well done, I guess. Like, he was definitely acting much more mature. And also, of course, he was, scarred, so to speak, from what happened in his timeline earlier. Now, I'm assuming this, and you guys can just confirm or not. And so for you guys and anyone else at home who's seen this episode and already familiar with it, like, it didn't take very long into the episode, right, where you pretty much knew how this was going to end up or how it was going to be resolved. Like, I'm guessing the first time they flash back to Voyager, 15 years earlier, that has to be the time when I was like, okay, I got it all figured out. The broad strokes. So is that kind of the same for everyone?
Well, again, Gilligan's Island. I knew they weren't going to get home. So
of course.
But the details about precisely how I was not certain about. I knew something went wrong, and I
didn't know the details, but I definitely knew they're definitely going to write this wrong, and none of this future is going to remain true by the end of the episode.
Okay, yeah, no, that
of course,
that much I pretty much felt. But like I said,
and that they were going to do something from the future. I at first I couldn't figure out how they were retroactively going to affect the past, so I didn't have that figured out. But I knew that's what was going to happen somehow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, again, we know the Gilligan's Island thing that they're going to do. The question is, are they going to make it interesting? How they do it? And that is what I liked about this episode. It was a long way to go. It felt like a lot was happening. And though we knew how it was going to turn out, I thought the journey was very interesting here.
And because obviously Star Trek and other television of the day, like in the 90s or late 80s, because everything sort of was not a bottle episode, but self-contained, it kind of sucks because there's a lot of interesting episodes of TNG, DS9, Voyager, etc., where something wacky is happening at the beginning of the episode. But you always know, whether it's a one-parter or a two-parter, you always know the status quo is always going to kind of be reset by the end. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which kind of sucks, though, because every time, yes, the beginning starts off radically. I don't know if this is the way it started on the DS9 episode, where right from the start, it's like we see a lot of the regular cast is like basically being like slaves working on DS9. And you just always know like nothing's permanent. And I guess that's just the nature of episodic television back in the day. If the premise starts off crazy, you just know.
There was always the surprise that sometimes it wouldn't. And that was a very rare positive, development when that happened. But it was very rare where that was the case.
Yeah, and I always appreciated the kind of comfort element of the formulaic episodic television. Like there's something just nice and familiar about that base template, and you know that it's always going to go back to the norm at the end. Mm-hmm. I just appreciate that. I wish that there was more stuff like that now.
Generally, I agree. And sometimes it really works. Like I was watching someone else watch Space Seed for the first time not too long ago. Obviously via YouTube. And I remember the person was like, Khan's taking over the ship and everything and put the captain in the barometric chamber. And the person was just like, wait a second. How are we getting out of this? There's like 7 minutes left in the episode. Is this a two-parter? Like, what is happening? And so that is kind of fun, when you are watching certain Star Trek episodes where everything is just so, like, the crew is just completely out of their depth. Mm-hmm. And then, don't worry, though. This will all get sorted out somehow. And obviously there's a lot of Doctor Who episodes that are like that as well. And so that is fun. And I do agree, generally, I do like the comfort of the formula of the older TV Trek. However, it just sucks. And even though a lot of these episodes, these ones that twist reality in some way radically, even though many of them are well written and interesting, it still sucks that you always kind of know there's going to be a get out of jail free card or a reset by the end.
Well, that was common of the era. It was that was
for sure.
It was just kind of expected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for Voyager in particular, it had that frustrating edge because they would build it up like, okay, this is the solution for us to get back to Earth. And at the end, you'd always get it shortened our trip by 2 years, this meaningless number that it's like, okay, maybe let's just focus on some other stuff than rather just getting home stuff. We'll just save that for when it's actually going to be a big deal.
Such a weird premise. But again, now I will forever think of Voyager as like Star Trek Gilligan's Island.
Really? That you hadn't thought about that, huh? That's
not that I recall, and now that you've said it, I will never be able to forget it. Yeah, because it is like those hokey shows of the late 60s, early 70s that just have these bizarre premises. Like, even though I never watched the show, I'm aware of it. But it's like Hogan's Heroes. Like, how do you do this show where you're just like trapped in a German POW camp, like over and over? Or you could almost even say something like MASH. Like, how do you stay in the Korean conflict for like 13 years?
By the way, Hogan's Heroes is great. You ought to watch it. I really do like that one.
It's just so bizarre to have that be the basic premise of whatever show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, but I think I started talking about Tessa, and then I kind of fell off there.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, because I wanted to say something about Tessa. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, maybe Chakotay was just that good in bed that he convinced her to erase herself to some degree, or at least that part of her life. But I was kind of like, this is some weird kind of selfless stuff that I don't know. I mean, maybe she was just like a Voyager groupie.
Yeah.
That always been like, oh, whatever happened to them.
Now that you bring that up, you would think that maybe there should have been some time for a conversation similar to what alternate Kirk had with La'an in Tomorrow. You know, where they realize they have to somehow try to fix the timeline, but they can't necessarily both exist, you know, once they fix it. And some conversation about who's supposed to be the prime universe.
Yeah, they give like a half-hearted conversation, and she's just kind of like, oh, I'm not going to back out. Like, I guess she thinks this is the right thing to do. And I guess that's fair. I just wish that I had a little bit more to grasp.
I don't know if it's fair now that I think about it. Because they do make it look so easy, and like, could a typical human so easily just go along with, oh, you know what? Yeah, my whole life and existence that I've experienced all shouldn't exist, and I'm going to put my all into ending my own existence as I know it. Yeah, that is a bit more heavy when you really think about it.
Yeah, and I kind of wondered if she was a Voyager groupie because of she was like wanting to do a tour of the ship, and she seems so overjoyed to meet the EMH. I wondered even if she like sought out Chakotay to like attach herself to that.
She's a stalker.
Yeah, but this is just me filling in for a relatively empty character.
Yeah, and when you describe her like that, I'm thinking of the fanboys in Galaxy Quest, and how excited they are to be sort of like part of a real mission.
Yeah, except this one with a suicidal bent. They could have made her more interesting if they leaned into something like that. But yeah, otherwise, just kind of a strange character lacking a lot of motivation.
Yeah, the thing I wanted to say about Tessa, since you brought her up, see, I was a little bit confused at the beginning because my initial thought was she was someone who was younger on Voyager as we knew it, I thought she was the older version of perhaps someone, and I know they did that in a different episode with a different character on Voyager.
Yeah, you're talking about Naomi Wildman. Yes, I remember.
Yeah. So I thought this character was maybe another version of that. So whether we had seen the character before on Voyager or not, I just sort of assumed that she was someone who was young 15 years ago who grew up. But of course I was wrong, but that's just what I thought. And I had to go check and see because I did read that this whole Harry temporal incident does get referenced again later in the Voyager series. And I was curious, like, does this Tessa ever show up again? But no, I think this is her only appearance or reference in the series, which seems a little lame to me.
I think it was disappointing that they didn't do more with her in this episode. It was rare because Chakotay was always so formal and about the business. We never really got to see him really have a relationship. There were a couple of times he was like tricked by aliens or whatnot. And you know, he did have a crazy ex. But other than them, you know, Chakotay never really had anybody. What I thought was disappointing is we could have had a reunion between Tessa and Chakotay when he arrives back with the season finale. He could have found her at the bar, not knowing who she was, but of course, at home, who she was.
Yeah,
and she would have been a fan of Voyager. She would have been interested in the history and what happened to him. So she's right there, and then she first meets Chakotay at this event. I think that would have been a far more solid closure for her as a character, a glimmer of hope for Chakotay in the future, rather than having him, you know, end up with Seven. That never made any damn sense. But that's another.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Though that would have been a great thing to add on to like the finale. And also, I guess I'm thinking now, probably one of the reasons why they had this character in this episode, or put her character in the position of the relationship, I'm guessing because from what we see earlier in the episode, am I right in remembering that they were kind of hinting there could be something going on between Chakotay and Janeway in the regular Voyager timeline?
Oh, God.
But not just in this episode, but I mean like in multiple episodes.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, I thought so. And so then I think that's really why they made this Tessa character the way she was, to show that obviously after Janeway is killed, you know, and when probably a lot of people were shipping those characters even before this, Janeway and Chakotay on Voyager, I think they were just trying to show this contrast of how different his life has moved on. You know, it'd be like if in TNG, if they had an episode like this and like you see that Worf and Deanna are starting to be a thing, and then they had this jump to the future, and then you'd be like, huh, Riker's with Deanna again. What's that all about? Like that, I think that's what they were kind of going for with this, and I get it, and it was fine. But then again, it leads back to the thing about when you were saying when we were saying, why is this Tessa so okay with wiping out her existence as she knows it? And then also, and they may or may not have talked about this off screen, but she's also like sending Chakotay back to the girl he was interested in 15 years ago, which seems like another insult to injury for Tessa.
Well, we don't know if she knows that or he's thinking about that.
True, but I know it. But yes, you're right.
Or if even Chakotay himself knows it.
True.
Yeah, the Janeway and him dynamic was always so strange. They never could really get a beat on what they're going for there. But
probably because they didn't know, the writers.
I'm sure they didn't, exactly. They kept dancing around the edge, like, should we do it? Maybe it'd screw things up too much.
Yeah, I think it's best that they left it with a question. You know, well, but you know, again, Star Trek has not been fantastic with relationships anyhow. So
that's true.
You know, yeah.
I like Tucker and T'Pol, but yeah. Anyway, even though it didn't go the way I wanted.
Another thing I appreciate with this episode that definitely makes it stand out for Voyager is the fact that we actually get kind of a connection to what was happening in the regular Star Wars universe with Geordi showing up in there. Star Trek.
Oh,
sorry.
Oh, okay. I was like, what?
Yeah, and he's wearing like the Insurrection costumes, and I guess this came out the same year as Insurrection. I was kind of like, oh, okay, it's rare to see the Voyager characters interacting with the greater universe in that way, so I could appreciate that.
Yes. So if I possibly did see this episode back in the day, I definitely didn't remember that. So that was a surprise to me. And it reminds me of watching random episodes of Lower Decks when they have like these unexpected cameos or guest appearances. So yeah, this felt like Neo Lower Decks to me. And I see that, I mean, maybe we shouldn't be surprised because it's Star Trek, but that insignia that Geordi's wearing, I believe it was established in the TNG finale that would be like the future Star Trek insignia. And then, of course, we do see it realized in present time in Picard, I believe. The Picard series.
Oh.
Yeah, they come back to it.
Yeah, because obviously in TNG it was an alternate future that never really happened. But in the supposed canon future, it gets canonized in... with Geordi here. Well, I don't even know if that canonizes it here, because that timeline also didn't exist ultimately. But for sure, Picard.
Sure.
Yeah, by the way, I did notice until the third time I restarted this episode that LeVar Burton actually directed this episode too.
Yes, indeed.
I was like, oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah, this is one of his.
Yeah, because I didn't remember any crossover of the cast except for like the premiere of Voyager. I couldn't remember any other real significant crossovers when I saw this today.
I'm sure there's like a holodeck or something, but not a real thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I did like that for sure. And it was also kind of weird because I'm thinking about Picard. I get it. Alternate Geordi is just doing what he has to do because he's obviously Federation and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just thinking about him stealing or helping to steal the Enterprise D in Picard. And I just thought, interesting. But
well, he did say that if I was in your shoes, I'd probably be doing the same thing.
He did. He did. He very well did.
So he is following orders, but
yeah. By the way, I did love seeing him. I love Geordi. I'm always so happy to see that guy, and it was great seeing him in Picard season 3. I was gonna say series 3, but it's not British.
So this thing that Seven has in her head, this temporal transmitter or whatever it is, was that something that was previously established in Trek at this time? Like, was there something with that, like in First Contact or a previous Voyager episode? Does anyone remember?
I can't remember, but it is established that Borgs have, crazy timepieces and random mechanisms for communication as part of their makeup. So, that did not seem a stretch, but I can't remember if they specifically talked about that particular, component. But Borgs always, the time synchronization, the mechanism they use to communicate with each other, I won't say telepathically, but, whatever Borg Wi-Fi is, all that stuff made a lot of sense. So that
it does make sense. I was just curious if we had seen on screen before where like Borg were communicating like across time, and I just can't remember.
It probably was in not Insurrection. What's the one with Picard?
Yeah, I said First Contact.
First Contact. Yeah, it was probably something.
I could see how that was a possibility, or it could have been, which would have come later. It could have been
in Enterprise.
Yes, in Enterprise, possibly. Yeah. I haven't seen that episode in a long time.
Yeah.
Oh wow, me neither. I always forget about that episode. Interesting.
But at least for Enterprise, because there's a lot of things that they would show us that seemed dubious, like interactions with Klingons and Romulans, where you were trying to like rack your brain trying to think how that fits in with what we saw in TOS. But at least the Borg situation made some sense in terms of, some repercussions from what happened in First Contact. So at least there was some type of establishment or for the precedent. Because obviously in the original timeline, those Borg weren't there. Pre-First Contact.
Just
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, just since you brought this up, since I wasn't on that episode again, the Under the Cloak of War, in that one too, I was very confused. I was like, shouldn't this look like the Klingons from Discovery? Why do they look like the classic TNG style? Or I was like, what should they look like, the TOS style one? I was completely lost by what they were doing with the Klingons during Strange New Worlds season 2.
I think we may have had this discussion when we talked about the premiere of Strange New Worlds season 2.
Oh, I forgot they were in that. That's right.
Yeah, because I think we probably discussed it then. And I know some of the people behind the scenes on Strange New Worlds just kind of said, yeah, we obviously had the Discovery Klingons that people weren't really keen on. Because if you remember, well, you don't remember, Caleb, but even though they looked drastically different in season 1, they did try to soften the look of the Klingons after season 1. Like, for instance, in season 1, the Klingons were completely hairless. But then, like, in season 2, they added hair. It's a weird thing to say out loud. But, and so then for Strange New Worlds, I think they were just like, yeah, so the Discovery Klingons are out there somewhere, and the TOS Klingons are out there somewhere, and now we have these Klingons, and there's just multiple kinds of Klingons out there. It's basically which is kind of what they started saying with the finale, trying to explain the different versions of the Gorn we've seen over time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of different kind of Gorn, they're not all exactly the same. Okay, there you go. Explained.
That's fair.
But I think, and I could be wrong, but I think if you go back to that first episode of Strange New World season 2, during one of the scenes down on the planet, while most of the Klingons we see up close are, the revised or returned to the Trek movie version, I think we do see one or two of the Discovery Klingons, but far in the background.
Mm-hmm.
They look like extras from Planet of the Apes.
Yeah,
remember?
I remember.
They had the hero apes, and then the ones in the background are basically wearing like a Michael Myers ape mask.
Beneath.
Yeah.
Some really terrible ones in there.
Yes, I feel like there might be one or two Discovery in the background.
Yeah,
of that episode.
I believe you were correct. I remember that too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So there is that. I've always wondered why we've practically never seen Klingons with forehead ridges just like the ones in the motion picture. Because I feel like they're their own variety because they all kind of matched each other compared to the later Trek films when you had a variety. So that's my little thing on Klingons. So okay, here was a big thing, I guess, for me. So once I basically kind of saw the whole episode or the majority of it and saw how it was all coming together, I realized that on paper, if you just jot down the main beats of this plot, it is essentially like the exact blueprint for the beats of Interstellar. And that weirdly bothered me a little bit, that realization, because if anyone's listened to me on any of the movie podcasts that we do, yes, I simply adore Interstellar very, very much. It's one of my all-time favorite sci-fi films of any era. And it kind of bothered me that it's very beat for beat, this episode. And that took a little bit away from how much I love Interstellar, just a little bit. And it's very similar to even the point when they're talking about the mystery transmission that that Seven received. That, what did Janeway say or someone say? like maybe they have like a guardian angel or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was thinking of how young Murph has like her ghost, who's like her protector or whatever, in Interstellar. But yeah, if you look at the whole thing, I don't think I need to explain it to either of you guys. It's all set up like there was a previous timeline where some humans survived in Interstellar, but not all humans survived. But then at some future point, it's probably the far distant descendants of humankind who go back and try to save those who didn't make it into the future timeline, if you know what I'm saying. And it all rests upon, like, to save the humans who didn't make it the first time, it all rests upon information that they couldn't possibly have when they needed it. So it took someone from the future to give them the essential key information. I hope there's no one who has seen this episode and not seen Interstellar, and I just spoiled Interstellar for you.
Well, it's almost 10 years old now, so I guess
I know, but
which is crazy to think. I can't believe that's almost 10 years old now.
I know, it's shocking to think that movie is 9 years old now. It's terrifying, actually.
Yeah. I would have never seen the connection, but yeah, it's all there. That is interesting.
Yeah, it's like the same exact bootstrap paradox or whatever you want to call it. Even to the point where Harry's like, well, wait a second. If future me was the one who sent us the message, then now that we've survived, how can future me send that message? It's like, what? Yeah, you're right.
Timey-wimey.
But I hate to think, because I think Christopher Nolan writes most of his movies like with his brother. He co-writes a lot of them. And I just think Interstellar is so brilliant. I'd hate to think that in the back of their minds, they either consciously or subconsciously remembered watching this episode of Voyager. And for some reason, that's the part that diminishes Interstellar for me now. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
If they would have taken some from Enterprise, he would have been all there. Oh, this is brilliant. Look, they saw what I saw.
That's not true. That's not true. That's not true.
I think
I would have been sad even if it was TNG that they were taking from. But I mean, it's a little bit like, even though I don't buy this argument either, but it's similar to the ridiculous argument on Avatar 2009 when people love saying, like, they think they're a movie expert all of a sudden. Oh, it's just Dances with Wolves with blue people, or it's Fern Gully and CGI. Brr, 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 brr. I don't buy that argument, but it's a little bit like that now that I've seen this and think about Interstellar.
Well, I'm just assuming it was a coincidence, but
it's remarkably close. Remarkably.
Well, messages in a bottle from the future are important. I won't say trope, but I will say theme when it comes to time travel episodes, or movies. So we'll credit it to an alignment of a quantum reality versus actually copying from the episode.
Just since you mentioned that scene with Harry at the end, when he's watching that little video of himself and just kind of sits there thinking, like, wow, I mean, essentially I just killed everyone on the ship. Like, somewhere I killed everyone. And it was only because of this future version that they're all still living right now. And he has this, like, disturbed look. And I was like, man, you got to feel just terrible in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. And then also I guess I had my Back to the Future cap on because I was like, how is this even possible? Like, seeing this message from a Harry that no longer will exist. I was just thinking about Marty's photograph or something. But also, oh shoot, what was I going to say? Oh, even though it's not the same, but Harry watching that video, even though it's not the same, it just reminded me of that scene where Seven gets promoted and then she watches that video from Shaw in Picard.
Oh, in Picard season 3. I was so lost. I was like, Shaw, I don't remember this character in Voyager. Or I was like, I don't remember her getting promoted either. But there you go.
Yeah. And speaking of, I know I don't know how many San Antonio listeners there are, if any, to this podcast. But yeah, both Seven and Shaw got added to the now voluminous guest list for SpaceCon 2024. There's so many guests. They have the entire like original cast of SG-1 showing up. It's
Oh, wow.
ridiculous. The guest list is ever long, of Star Trek, Star Wars, and other franchises. But anyway, I'm probably talking to two people in the room right now.
Well, I've only got two more notes. Carl, do you have any that you want to say first?
Oh no, go ahead. I want to hear what your notes are.
One of them was a small little moment that I thought was cute in the episode. The first time that they, I guess, reawakened the EMH, Harry's like, "Oh yeah, I want your help," and as they're walking away, he like puts his hand on the EMH's arm, and you can see him being like kind of awkward about it, like, "Oh, like don't touch me." But at the end, right before the EMH is about to sacrifice himself, like, "Oh, you can use my power," he touches Harry's arm, and they both have like a moment of enjoying the fact that they work together on this.
You saw that too. I noticed that too.
Yeah, I just thought that was a sweet little thing.
I noticed that too. Yeah.
No, that's nice. I did not notice that, but that is nice.
Nice little symmetry. I saw that too, and yeah, there's a lot of that going on in this episode.
Yeah, I didn't catch that moment, but the moment that it reminds me of that I obviously noticed, I did like when Harry was looking at the video, you can hear the EMH's voice in the background.
Mr. Kim, yes.
Yeah, so I did like that because, you know, Harry doesn't, present day Harry doesn't really know who all else. Like, I was almost sad that Chakotay didn't get a mention because he'll never know that he played a role as well. Or they could have been like, and Tessa. And he would have been, huh? Who's that?
Yeah, that was a good catch. Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah, just nice little moments like that, especially for someone who hasn't seen these characters in a while. It's nice to come back and remember the persnickety way of the EMH. And
oh yeah,
it was just a nice little bit there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you pointed that out. And also, it also reminds me that I want to say, almost from the very beginning of the series, Voyager, I want to say the EMH might have been always my favorite character on Voyager. If we're putting sex appeal aside, yeah, I think, he was by far and away always my favorite character on Voyager.
Can't disagree. And even though I don't really love First Contact, his moment in First Contact was always my favorite part as a kid. I used to fast forward my tape to that part.
Yes, that was
and just watch it.
Very cool. Very cool cameo. And I'll never forget the first time I ever saw Robert Picardo on screen. I was a huge fan of the Wonder Years when it first came out on ABC back in the day. And anybody my age or a little bit older remembers the coach scene with the sex ed in the Wonder Years. Iconic Robert Picardo scene. It's so good.
I always think of him from Gremlins 2. Love him in that.
Oh, well, I did see that too, but I don't remember. I haven't seen that movie in almost 30 years or something.
Yeah, he ends up getting hooked up with this girl gremlin, since they all get mutated in that movie.
I vaguely remember what you're talking about.
Yeah, she's chasing around in the bathroom, and he's got all these kisses all over him at the end.
Yes, I remember that.
Just has this look like, she's actually kind of attractive. Maybe I'm okay with this. Great ending to that movie.
I totally remember that scene. Now that you mentioned, I just didn't connect that was Robert Picardo in my brain. I only had one more note on this episode.
Sure.
And that was that I noticed, just watching it earlier today, I was like, wow, that was quick. Like just the full runtime. Obviously there's no commercials, watching it streaming. And I just thought, wow, okay. Because I'm like on two minds about this. On the one hand, it is like a bottle episode in the sense that, well, actually, let me go back to that point after I make the first point, which is, I was like, because I noticed other commenters saying this who are watching classic Star Trek for their first time, and they always note like, wow, it's crazy how all these things are happening in this episode, and it all wraps like in 45 minutes, which is getting to my next point, which is obviously in modern television, most of us are used to ongoing like serialized storytelling. Even if the modern show does have episodes, there'll still always be lingering questions for like the season arc. But obviously, especially in TOS, it's like, no, almost all threads are sewn together, in that one episode or two-parter. If it's a two-parter, like everything is put back in place. And so, yeah, that's my second thought. So it all went by so quick watching it, because even though Modern Trek is approximately that long, there are still many episodes that get into the 50, 55, almost 60-minute length. But 45 just seems so brisk. And then just talking about, so this is what it was. So my other thought was, while generally I agree, modern times it's better that you tend to only get about 8 to 10 episodes per season for most modern like drama shows or drama length shows. And that's kind of the standard. And generally I think that's better, because theoretically when you only have 8 or 10 episodes to work with, then you should be just showing good stories. Like, you shouldn't really have bottle episodes, or at least not more than one typically, for budget's sake. So generally I like that modern trend, but especially as it pertains to Star Trek, and it pertains to a lot of other shows, that's what was part of the beauty of having 25 or more annual episodes is, they don't have the same budget to spend per episode, but that means due to budget constraints, writers tended to work harder, especially on Star Trek, to make it interesting, even if we're just on the ship the entire episode. And that's where you get a lot of creative ideas that would happen in the old days, because they couldn't like create a bunch of CGI effects or go to a new planet, or whatever. They just had to make something interesting, almost as if you're writing like a stage play that takes place on the Enterprise or whatever ship you're on, Voyager or whatever. So as much as I love or prefer modern series making, man, I do miss that about when we had multiple episodes per season of Star Trek and other shows, because because this episode is not like one of those big ones of its time for Star Trek. Like, it wasn't one of those set piece type, we're throwing all the money into this episode. It is very much just reusing the sets and redressing them. And it's more, because I was thinking that the episode Timeless, it's relatively simple in execution, and it does feel by the numbers in terms of Star Trek television storytelling, even though it is interesting. But at the same time, like, if I just judge the episode on its own merits, I would give blank score. But I think an episode like this gets better after the fact, and your brain kind of does the thinking and fills in the things that you don't necessarily see on screen. Like, it's the kind of story where you'll think back of the repercussions. Like, you'll still be thinking days and weeks later about the impact on Harry Kim's character after having gone through this. And you'll idly think about the future that never was. You guys know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And you get that out of a relatively inexpensive episode that it almost could have been a filler, but you get these interesting filler episodes back in the day when you had such a high episode count. So I really do miss that about the old model.
Yeah, and with that, the large episode count and the fact that it was episodic instead of serialized. With serialized storytelling, you kind of get stuck in, I mean, maybe every now and again you get some variants, but overall you're dealing with the same kind of characters, villains as well, same villain characters mostly, and you're just following a plot that's all kind of somewhat samey. I love the box of chocolates variants with episodic television back in the day, particularly with Star Trek.
and with modern shows, some pull it off well and others don't. With the serialized storytelling, a lot of shows, even if they're like sci-fi, like I'm thinking of The 100 right now, and many other shows like that.
Oh man.
Where even though it's a sci-fi show or a dystopian show, or at times like certain stretches of the Walking Dead series, because it's serialized, and also those shows kind of had bigger episode counts because it was before streaming was really taking off. What ends up happening with the show you're watching, even if it's sci-fi, because they have to keep going on and on, the show starts turning into like a primetime soap opera oftentimes. And I'm thinking of like so many CW, WB or whatever shows, and like so many genre shows that have to do with something supernatural or sci-fi-ish. Like you said, it's the same characters every week, so they turn into primetime soaps, which is, yes, weird and unappealing.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that necessarily one format is better than the other. I just wish that they hadn't almost completely excised the episodic television. I mean, essentially now they just leave it for like kids shows or sitcoms or animated stuff. Or
the I don't know how these shows, they basically remain the most at least in the United States. They are basically the only network shows that scripted network shows that still hold any numbers, and it's the NCIS this, NCIS that, CSI this, CSI that, Law and Order this, Law and Order that. Those are the only like episodic television that continues to really persist, like on the old model.
Yeah, and I think both definitely have their place. I just wish we could see more back to this kind of comfort episodic television kind of template. I still think that new audiences have an appetite for it.
Yeah. And like I said, even the younger millennials and Gen Z, because they're so not used to it, to them it's kind of like, wow, you can tell stories like this on television. And it weirdly kind of like almost retroactively plays into supposedly what their interests are. I mean, if what I hear is to be believed, they always talk about, and you kind of notice this actually, like I was watching a show, I think it's like takes place in Chicago and it like follows firefighter, or it's like Chicago 911 or something.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I never watched shows like that, but I watched like 6 episodes just because they had Liv Tyler on it, and I can't remember what's his name, guy from Parks and Rec, Rob Lowe. So I was kind of watching it for like 6 episodes just to see those 2 actors on television, and I noticed watching that show that it felt like one episode was split into like 5 or 7 minute sections, kind of like the original hand-drawn animated Clone Wars. Like it almost like one episode felt like they took 10 webisodes and strung them together. And I was thinking, is that because they're going with the whole short attention span thing? Because in one episode, they would take like 6 different 911 calls in one episode. Like, that's crazy. So they'd like wrap one and then go to commercial, and then a new one, go to commercial, and then a new one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I was like, I think that's playing into short attention spans or something. And so that's what I'm saying. Like the old fashioned way of storytelling and wrapping everything up by the end of the episode, almost in an unintentional way, can play into the supposed shorter attention spans of the younger generations.
Oh, that sounds odd. Did those episodes work at all? Or did they feel kind of disorganized?
Oh, the Chicago 911 doesn't work for me, but I'm assuming it works for someone.
Yeah, I guess those shows are huge.
But again, if you watch them, you'll see like they just, all right, we saved the girl. Okay, now we have to go to the office fire. Got the fire out. Oh no, there's like a kidnapping, or there's a cat in a building. And it's just in one episode.
Huh.
And they're just like all over the place. It's really crazy.
Well, I guess I feel like we may be rounding out to the end, so I'll say my last note. It doesn't really have anything to do with the episode itself. It has to do with the actor playing Chakotay. Robert Beltran, was that it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, a few months ago, just out of coincidence, I happened to see two movies that I didn't know he was going to be in, either one of them, both from the 80s. The first one was Night of the Comet, great little cult film. He shows up in there, and I was happy to see him.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah, but the real highlight, the one that I would definitely recommend people go check out, so fun and so strange, Eating Raoul. He plays the titular Raoul character. That movie's just kooky as hell, full of personality, and yeah, definitely one to check out if you haven't seen it. He's a lot of fun in it as well.
Yeah, the thing about Robert Beltran that I think about, and I don't know exactly what like his ethnicity or how it breaks down in real life. I've never looked into that, but obviously his character that he plays in Voyager is supposed to have some type of native or indigenous roots on Earth, which I actually kind of thought was cool when Voyager first came out. I mean, the idea of it, but the way he looks, and I didn't really think this back in the day, but I'm thinking it now. He kind of reminds me like he could be like a cousin, and maybe it's because I've seen a few Chips episodes recently. Like he almost feels like he could be like a cousin of Eric Estrada to me, in the sense that whatever his background is, Beltran doesn't at all come across to me like a typical American Latino I randomly run into. Likewise, Eric Estrada doesn't seem like, or at least the character he portrayed on Chips doesn't seem like the typical. I mean, I've met some guys who are like that character in real life. Why can't I think of his character's name? Poncherelli. Although, yeah, I have met some guys who are kind of like that in real life, but they both strike me as like old school TV Latinos. Like, yeah, but it's like the TV version. I don't know what this means, what I'm talking about right now, but I'm just saying, like, I always appreciated the concept of the Chakotay character, even though he seemed like, yeah, he just exists on television. I don't know where I'm going with that, but there you go.
Oh, interesting points. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you all giving the episode a shot. There are many reasons why I very much like this episode, and you all kind of touched on pieces of it. And so, again, my final opinion about all of it is, Eric, you highlighted one of the most important things, which is you got to put yourself back in, 90s, 98 when this episode came out. Now, already we have the limiting factor of episodic Star Trek. Additionally, we have the Gilligan's Island bottle show nature of Voyager. So that, pins in a lot of things in terms of what to expect from the episode. But even with that minimal budget, the bottle show nature of it, that we, know that everything's going to be reset in the end, even with those constraints, this episode takes us in a lot of different directions, and the expanse of what they're able to cover in such a short amount of time is quite remarkable. I mean, again, think about the underutilized characters that finally get some highlights. Think about the emotional attachment, not just with Janeway and Chakotay that we get to see, not just with Harry and the Doctor that we get to see, not just with Tom and Harry that we rarely, get to see develop to this extent. All of this stuff is going on in this episode. The technology, gadgetry that holds things together is not implausible and hokey. You can always throw some kind of, random crystal or some foolishness into the middle of the episode just to try to hold the story together. But given what they were trying to do, given the limitations of what the episode was, even the magic technology that holds all of this stuff together between the quantum slipstream and the Borg implants, the time component of the communication, that held together remarkably well, given how complex that core premise was. I thought they did some really interesting things with editing in this episode. We have got to keep track of 2, maybe 3 different timelines, and they managed to keep it straight, and they made the cuts very interesting at the same time. There are these moments where we are expecting to see, Voyager and the Delta Flyer, and the scene cuts, and it's actually LaForge and the Delta Flyer in the future. But it's the playfulness in which they sew the scenes together that is really well done. And go back and watch it, because the way they
I agree.
up, you're like, well, okay. And they managed to transition from time and context back and forth in a way where you don't get lost. I mean, look, 7, even frozen, she was hot. I mean, it's just the stuff just seemed to really work well together. And like you said, I mean, again, I of course love the cameo with LeVar in here. That was very cool, and and to see them touching the modern Star Trek, again at the time, modern Star Trek era. I mean, look at all of this stuff. Never mind the fact that the story that was going on in this story is basically, the foundation of like 3 different time travel shows, including Low Key, by the way, which I happened to watch just before going back to rewatch this one.
Oh, wow.
Including
Low Key season 2 is really good.
Right? So,
Yes, it is.
So, hello, this one episode is in like 2 movies. It's Low Key. It's got, all of this stuff that's going on. And it's with the $8 budget and bottled nature of Voyager. Plus, it's in a 40-minute window. I'm trying to say, I hear what you guys are saying, and I appreciate you humoring me, the old guy on this. But I'm telling you, this is a really remarkable episode. And, if you put it in the context of what they had to work with, and you back up and look at what they were able to achieve, there's a lot of really big stuff happening here. And in a way that when you compare it with other Voyager episodes, the other ones do not have the same tightness, the same, you were talking about speed. You said this episode felt fast. It felt fast. Yeah. But look at everything that we were able to do. It was very smooth. What was going on, scene after scene, that, like I said, we're jumping back and forth through time. We got peril of, galactic dimensions. Tess, I thought, again, I agree with you. She felt a little artificial in terms of, why she'd be willing to sacrifice the future and all that kind of stuff. However, she also was a reminder of the stakes that were going on. That if they're going to change the timeline, that is going to erase not just her, but 15 years worth of other people. We needed an anchor to try to clearly define what Harry was jeopardizing by resetting the timeline here. Of course, we have the connection to the crew. And of course, we have connection to all the folks that we've known all along. But to just automatically reset 15 years because you made a mistake, that has some implications. And to put Tessa in here to show us tangibly what the impact that was going to be, there was a lot happening in this episode. And again, for Voyager, given the limitations of what they were able to achieve, it's exciting. We get to see the ship wrecking, and there's a lot happening. And again, when you think about how many of the other Voyager episodes went, the pacing, how the scenes fit together, character development, for them to use the underutilized characters, the pacing that they had, limitations of the episode, cool technology, interesting story. Again, a story that basically is the foundation of like 2 movies, modern television shows that we're watching now in 1998. I just want to, give a little respect.
Oh, absolutely.
I like Timeless a lot. I like this episode a lot, and given what they had to work with, it's quite remarkable. So that's that's
No, Carl, I completely agree with everything you just said.
Mhm.
And actually, just based on what you just said, I'm going to add a half a star to what I was originally going to rate this.
all right.
No, seriously. I'm adding half a star because of what you just said. And also, you reminded me, I wanted to say, yeah, like listening to what you were saying, if they did this type of storyline in modern Trek, like in Picard or Discovery, I guarantee it would have been like a 3 or 4 part arc.
Unfortunately, yes.
Mhm.
Yes, they and that's how they fill their episode counts in those two shows.
Mhm.
Is they take a concept and then they extend it. What would have normally been one episode in the old days, they make it 3 or 4 parts, which is kind of annoying about the modern version when that happens.
Yeah.
But also, when you also were describing this episode and how much they did, considering the constraints of the situation, you kind of elevated this episode for me because you started making me think of other notable episodes of TNG in particular. And I think this does approach being as good as some of those very memorable TNG episodes. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also, I noticed while watching this the first time and then watching it in the background during the discussion, considering this is sort of almost a filler episode for season 5.
Now you keep calling it that, but Rick Berman would not agree.
The reason I say filler, yeah, you're right about that. The reason I say filler is because you can tell they weren't trying to throw more of their seasonal resources into this one episode. Like it's very noticeable when they do it at other times in 90s Trek. Like you can tell the ones that they spend the money on.
Well, okay, but
and build new sets and things like that. That's why I'm calling it tentatively a filler, but it's not truly a filler.
It's
episode.
not truly a filler, and they did put some budgets in this. But there are 3 main things that are the giveaway.
One, I was going to give one right now.
What? Huh? What?
I was going to give one of the giveaways right now.
What's
or
that? Yeah, go ahead.
Something that stands out to me. As I was saying, when I watched it the first time and upon rewatch and background, even though they do mostly reuse pre-made sets, it's interesting how many different and unique CGI shots they have.
That's the big one.
Yeah, and not only that, but the quality of the CG shots even seems better for the time in Star Trek, because I know from watching more Enterprise episodes more recently, there's a number of Enterprise episodes where the CG looks
dodgy,
rushed. Yeah. And it's weird because that show was actually made in HD where this one wasn't. So that's a little bit weird and concerning. And then also, because some of this I was like, wow, for 1998 television, this looks pretty good. In most, I mean, even the Flash on CW had worse CGI, multiple times worse CGI than what we saw in this episode. And we saw like unique shots, like the Galaxy class ship above the Delta Flyer, and I don't know that I've seen the Galaxy class ship look that good on television before. And then also, again, I already mentioned Enterprise taking a step backwards in effects, but then even DS9 of this time, or in the 90s, like the way I remember, especially later seasons of DS9, there's a lot of copy and paste going on. Very much reminds me of 70s Battlestar Galactica, where you kept seeing the same ships, like doing flybys.
It's the turn, spin, and the destruction of the Cylon ship. Sometimes they peel to the left, sometimes they peel to the right, but it's the same shot.
Or the launching of the Vipers, or the landing of the Vipers is like the same, or the same random background ships that you see flying in the convoy. And a lot of later season DS9, especially when they start bringing in all these Klingons and Dominion ships, it's like doing BSG editing. So yeah, this is unique, very unique.
Yeah. That's again, they put some money in it. There is a quality of the editing that is not routine for Voyager. I was absolutely going to talk about the CG shots. I mean, they're, like you pointed out, that shot with the Enterprise, Galaxy class above the Delta Flyer, beautiful shot where Tess is looking out the window of the Delta Flyer, and you can see the crescent of the planet that's there, crashing a Voyager on the snow on the ice planet. Those shots were just for this episode. So,
Yeah, exactly.
There was a lot of stuff that Berman put a couple of bucks extra into this one, and that's where it kind of showed up. So yeah, it was more. It was more.
I would think even LeVar Burton being there is kind of them being like, okay, we want this one to stand out. I'm sure he was in the promo, so that they knew that they had something better here with this script.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to go look for that promo because I am curious if they tried to promote by showing him in the promo, or if they left it as a surprise. Now I'm wondering.
I would think that he would have been there. I guess we'll find out if I can find it.
It makes sense, but I need to go investigate on my own later to find out.
Yeah. Plus, it had an emotional punch too.
Yeah, no, it did. It did.
Which, by the way, when Harry started playing that video and we see his face as he hears the fact of his mistake, killing all those folks, I definitely felt some emotion for him there. As much as I may knock poor Garrett Wang. I thought he sold that scene quite well.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. All right. What's going to be our unit of measure? There's a lot of things to choose from.
Yeah, I guess there is a lot of them. Anything come to mind, Carl?
Quantum slipstreams?
Sure. I can do that. I'll go ahead. I don't have much else to say. So I'll just say that, yes, originally I was going to give this a 3.5, but after Carl's closer, I'm going to up it to a 4. Before I heard what Carl said, I was like, yeah, I like this a lot, but it's not a 4. No, I'm not giving Voyager a 4. But no, it's a 4. It's a 4 out of 5. And I also read earlier before our discussion, I read that this was in a lot of top 10 lists for Voyager episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And again, before our discussion, I was like, is it really top 10 though? But now I think, yeah. Next.
Yeah, I was going to say, I kept dancing back and forth between a 3.5 and a 4. But for Voyager itself, if I was to separate it from the rest of Star Trek and was just rating it specifically for this show, I would give it a 4.5 for Voyager in particular. But for regular Star Trek, I'll give it a 4. Because this definitely stands heads and tails over many, many Voyager episodes. Just in the competence in the writing, the more emotional kind of weight that they would bring. Even that small little moment with the Doctor with the arm thing, that definitely that touched me a little bit. I was like, oh, that little small bit, I feel like had a nice bit of characterization there. And so yeah, overall I'll give it a 4 as well.
Yeah. 4.5 for me. It's one of my favorite episodes of Voyager. So definitely a 4.5.
Yeah. If there was more Voyager episodes of this quality, I'm sure I'd have a much higher opinion of the show overall, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. There are a couple of others. There are a couple of other ones.
So yeah, if you're out there and you haven't really watched that much Voyager before, you can't hardly go wrong with this one that we just spoiled for you.
Well, it's hardly us spoiling it, seeing as it's the core of like 4 movies and television shows. So, you're going to see it.
I know.
You're going to see it someplace.
And maybe some listeners will do what I used to do when I used to listen to a lot of fan podcasts on different shows. If they start talking on the podcast, if they start talking about something that starts intriguing me, like when they start talking about the plot, etc., then I'll usually shut it off, go out and watch it, and then listen to the rest. Because back in the day, a lot of times I would just listen to whole episodes where they spoil something I haven't seen, and I'd be like, okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But this would be a pauser for me, where I'd come back after I watch it, because it's definitely interesting on paper.
What other story comes to mind that this reminds me of, and it's appropriate for the season. It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Every time the interplexing beacon rings, an angel gets its wings. So, it's
Yeah, I was thinking about that because earlier when you were talking about how you could sort of say this kind of inspired like some movies that came out after it, when you said that, I was instantly thinking about Scrooged. And then I was thinking about Groundhog's Day and End of Tomorrow, or whatever that movie's called.
Yeah.
Oh, Edge of Tomorrow. Yeah.
Edge of Tomorrow, or the alternate title. I can't think of the 3-word alternate
Live,
title.
Die, Repeat. Was that it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because I think Edge of Tomorrow was the original American or Western name, and then they officially changed it to the other one.
Better title.
Yeah, I agree too. But when Carl said that, those movies were popping in my brain. So it's kind of funny that you said It's a Wonderful Life now.
Yeah, and by the way, I was quite glad to see that this held up as well as my memory had it. Because I think it was this year that we did Distant Origin. That was another one that I had very strong, very positive memories for.
Oh yeah, me and Caleb did that.
Yeah, and I've still overall liked Distant Origin, but it definitely shared more of the usual Voyager issues.
Yeah, that one it was likable to a degree, but it had some typical Voyager issues when me and Caleb were discussing it.
Yeah, still one that I like quite a bit and hold above many Voyager episodes, but this one held up much better.
Yeah, Distant Origin is one I do remember seeing when it first came out, and I do remember finding the plot quite appealing at the time when it came out. Less so in modern times, but yeah, and again for me, this one was basically like a hidden gem because if I did see it, I barely remember anything about it. So this was very pleasant.
Nice. All right.
Yeah, so there you go. Oh, and before we go and close out the show, I think Caleb is going to tell me and Carl what we will be discussing on a future episode of Romulans Bearing Gifts.
Oh, yes. Let me pull up the title for this because it's a little bit of an odd title. Let me see.
I don't even know what series it's going to be. I'm excited.
Okay, so when we resurrected RBG, I did make a list of episodes that I would love to talk about one day. And this one was, definitely one that I'm very curious to hear if you guys have seen this. I feel like maybe you haven't. And it is a unique episode for this particular program. This is Season 1, Episode 8 of Star Trek The Animated Series, The Magic of Megas 2.
I've probably not seen it because I think I've only seen 3 TAS episodes all the way through. So there's a good chance I have not seen this. What about you, Carl?
It's been so long. I mean, really, I saw this like in the early 80s. So I have, I would not remember it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Star Trek The Animated Series. So I definitely for my next pick had to pull out one of those again. So looking forward to chatting that one with you guys.
Yeah.
So the Magics of Megas 2?
That's it. Yeah.
All right. Mm-hmm.
I need to I've been wanting to buy the Blu-ray set of the animated series for a really long time. And I love when I see comments like on Amazon, how does this look HD? Like, how is this even possible? HD didn't exist in the 70s. Oh, I love seeing comments like that on movie forums.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely. Because that's definitely the one series of Trek where I've seen by far the least.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been excited. And all these episodes of TAS that I've never seen, I've always considered them like little goodies that'll pop up here and there on this podcast feed eventually, which is why I haven't taken the time to watch them on my own. Because I've just kind of been saving them for when they come up.
Yeah, keep them fresh.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was fun. Not talking about new Trek. A little change of pace. And I definitely look forward to that discussion. At some point, we're going to get to A Taste of Armageddon with Marcella. And who knows what else down the road. Because we still got some time till we get... Well, Discovery will be here soon enough. But I don't think anyone's in a rush for that. But it's going to be quite some time till we get Strange New World Season 3. So, and I'm pretty sure we're not going to cover Discovery Season 5 episodically. Otherwise, it's just only going to be me and Carl on every episode. If we do,
we might be able to fish in Cat.
Maybe. I was hesitant to bring her up. I don't want to have too much wishful thinking and jinx it, but possibly. But yeah, right now there's no plans to cover that. But maybe we'll do like a season 5 episode of RBG at some point of Discovery. I don't know. Whatever. There's no rules. So, alrighty then. Closing out the show today. This is Eric.
This is Carl.
And this is Caleb.
And until next time,
boom.
Beware Romulans bearing gifts.
I wrote that down from this episode.
Did they say that? Just like that?
Yeah, Harry says it when he's talking about what happened after they lost track of the Voyager.
Oh, okay. I don't remember it up, but yeah, okay. Cool.
Nice.
Cool. Oh, I did not know Ad Astra. Oh,
Ad Astra.
Ad Astra per Aspera. I did not know that was like the state motto of Kansas, and that it's printed and it's printed on their license plates. I did not know that.
That's cool.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I just learned that like a few weeks ago, and I was like, "What?" Because I thought they had like special Star Trek plates or Strange New World plates, but no, that's just the state motto.
That's cool. Didn't have to go very far with that Latin.